Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Going to talk to you here from my lovely Brooklyn apartment. We're going to have yet another late. So glad that you're here. Let's jump right into it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome. We're here tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. Now, the way this works, we'll be following our normal format, which is first I give my opening remarks, then followed by the roll call. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. Now, questions can be sent via Rumble Rants. You can cap in 22. But the best way, the absolute best way to send questions is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is great. You can send questions by buy me a coffee anytime. If you're watching this later, you can send it, right? We've already got one in the docket for tonight. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send your questions. Now, as far as announcements, the big announcement is coming up January 11th. We are having a big CPI gathering in New Jersey to kick off the new year. It's going to be really, really exciting. We're going to honor some important local activists for their great work. We're going to eat some good food, listen to some good music. Garland Nixon is there. Very exciting. Didn't expect that, but I talked to Garland, and it looks like Garland Nixon is on the program for January 11th. Yay, we love Garland Nixon. He's a great guy. It will not be the first CPI event he's spoken at, but it'll be great to have him. Garland Nixon will be there. We're going to honor 3 important local activists, good music, good speeches, everyone who has an opportunity to ask a question during the Q&A. That's the way it works. After dinner, we're going to have a long Q&A where anyone can get up and ask questions. It's a great event. So I hope that you will go ahead and register and join us in New Jersey on January 11th. So yeah, as I said before, we're going to be following our usual format. First, the opening remarks. Then from there, we'll be having a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, for the remainder of the night. So if you have something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, it's very important that you buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way, the absolute best way to send questions for the second half of the show. We actually have 2 buy me a coffees of our end, but we need more. Buy me a coffee, right? Get me talking. We have 2 buy me a coffees that have come in night with, but more is always better. So send me questions for the second half of the program. Join us in New Jersey at our event. And I guess I'll just jump right into it. Folks, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, has resigned. And this is a nuanced situation. I was shocked to see her resign. I was utterly shocked to see it happen. And I didn't quite know what to make of it. I just did not see it coming. But I'll tell you what's going on. And I'm gonna break it down for you here tonight. Right? I'm not supposed to say that, right? I'm probably break it down for you, right? Is that like condescending mansplaining? But no, I've done a lot of thinking about this. And I have come to some conclusions about why. You remember when Marjorie Taylor Greene first got elected? They treated her like she was the Antichrist. They talked about that she was anti-Semitic. They said that she had talked about Jewish space lasers. They called her the 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 QAnon candidate, right? And that when she got sworn into office, the House of Representatives passed a congressional resolution condemning her. She was viewed as hard MAGA, and she said she supported Israel, and and she just looked. She was trying her hardest to just be a regular Republican, but they could smell something about her, and they could smell something about her, and they were like, get her out of here, get her out of here. But she stayed in there, and she was first spoke up about Ukraine. She didn't think funding the Ukraine war was correct. She was a big supporter of President Trump. She was a big supporter of the people that were arrested in the January 6th events. She was a big supporter of the prisoners. And she was in office, and then Trump got into office. And as Trump was coming into office, and after Trump was in office, she became more and more critical of Israel. She had come into office originally. They had called her anti-Semitic and said she was tweeting about space lasers, and she apologized or whatever. But then, after Trump, she began to speak rather critically of Israel and of Trump's support for Israel. And she talked about Jeffrey Epstein. And she talked about the Epstein case quite a bit, met with the Epstein victims, wanted the Epstein files released. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, she became the symbol of a current that is much bigger than herself. And I believe among the American people, it's a very large percentage. I would say she represents 20 to 30% of the U.S. public, which is pretty significant, that are what you might call dissident MAGA. Right. So Trump supporters right now, Trump's approval ratings are at about 40%. Right. You got 40% of people that support him. But I would say about at least half of those people are in a category of what you would call dissidents, that they support Donald Trump, but they're not thrilled about where things have been going. And that, Marjorie Taylor Greene was the elected face of dissident MAGA. You also had Thomas Massie from Kentucky. Now, Thomas Massie is a little bit more of and Trump turned on him pretty quickly and was denouncing him quite a long time ago. And Thomas Massie has a history of being a libertarian activist, so he was never really considered completely MAGA. He called himself MAGA. Trump turned on him, denounced him. He was anti-Israel, so he was denounced by Trump a long time ago. Marjorie Taylor Greene, on the other hand, libertarian. She came into office purely as MAGA, as Miss QAnon, etc. And she was pro-Israel for a while and then shifted her position. And now Marjorie Taylor Greene has been denounced by Trump, and she is dissident MAGA. And dissident MAGA is very, very big in the podcast sphere. Tucker Carlson used to be the top TV news host on Fox News. Tucker Carlson is one of the most well-known faces of dissident MAGA. Candace Owens is dissident MAGA. She was somebody who was part of Turning Points USA, part of the Charlie Kirk, Wire, Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro, but she became critical of dissident MAGA. And there's another character called Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes has been a racist on the internet for quite some time, and he's becoming much more prominent. And dissident MAGA represents people that voted for Donald Trump, considered themselves Trump supporters, considered themselves at odds with the establishment. But since Trump has taken office, they have not seen what they want out of Trump. And a lot of dissident MAGA are anti that Israel is, it's a country that should control and have influence and dominance over the United States. A lot of dissident MAGA are against wars, and they're not thrilled about threats against Venezuela. And dissident MAGA very much was interested in the Epstein case and Jeffrey Epstein and everything that was going on with that. And, the sex blackmail stuff that was associated with Jeffrey Epstein. They were pretty disgusted by it, and they wanted answers about it. And they liked Trump's promise to release files around it. They haven't gotten it. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has been the face of dissident MAGA, basically. And folks, dissident MAGA is the most important current in American politics right now. Why? Because they are the people that are against the establishment. And, as somebody who spent my entire, youth and my adult life groups That might be a hard thing for me to admit, but at this point, it's not really hard for me to admit because I've seen it. I mean, unfortunately, the communist groups are all completely controlled if they haven't been destroyed. A lot of them have just been destroyed. The International Socialist Organization, liquidated, was destroyed by sex scandals. They're just part of DSA. The group that I was in, the Workers' World Party, it imploded, and there's very little left of it. You know, there's probably less than 30 members. They don't have a presence in a number of the cities where they used to have a presence. They've fractured into a million pieces. You know, and there's very little when you talk about left, right? You're talking about anarchists, communists, Trotskyites, social democrats. There's nothing left, right? I mean, the Communist Party of the United States, they've run articles on their websites saying that that Russia is a bigger threat than NATO. They've published crazy hysterical pieces linking me to Alexander Duno, and they've had a crackdown on anyone in their group who doesn't have Trump derangement syndrome. You know, there's, you know, all the left has pretty much deteriorated. And at this point, if you're on the left and you don't have Trump derangement syndrome, and you don't, and you have any questions about the trans thing, any questions about anything other than the MSNBC line, you're not welcome. And most of the left has just been absorbed into Democratic Socialists of America, which Democratic Socialists of America has always been an intelligence operation since it was formed by Michael Harrington and all kinds of CIA people back in the late 70s. And so the left is completely controlled. I mean, you on the left and raise any questions, right? I mean, and MAGA, unfortunately, the mainstream of MAGA, Trump as a MAGA president, you know, even though the establishment is against him, even though it appears the establishment doesn't trust Trump, Trump is pro-Israel. Trump bombed Iran. Trump is threatening war against Venezuela. Trump speech, and then he started deporting pro-Palestine students for their legal activism, you know, and Trump has been a disappointment in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of people who support Trump, who were Trump supporters. They're part of the Make America Great Again MAGA movement that are true to their principles. And they say, look, America first doesn't mean Israel first. They say MAGA, not the way that they've put it. You know, they are sincere in advocating civil liberties. They're sincere in saying we don't want foreign wars. And dissident MAGA is probably the most important space in American politics right now. Okay? It really is. There's anybody who's saying Russia is not our enemy, if there's anyone who's saying the Israel lobby shouldn't control our politics, if there's anybody who is saying that, you know, the FBI is out of control and we got to protect our free speech and civil liberties, if there's anyone who seems to understand that our country is run by a group of big banks and international police that are destroying our civil liberties, it's dissident MAGA, right? And I'm telling you this, ideologically, they're very confused. A lot of them think that globalism is communism. A lot of them want free market capitalism. A lot of them have fantastical, over-the-top conspiracy understand. A lot of them are very confused on a lot of points. But the globalist imperialist establishment, when the globalist imperialist establishment, you know, when they want to prolong this war and they say, if you got to support Ukraine and we got to fight till the last Ukrainian, they say no. When the globalist imperialist establishment says that, you know, that Russian President Vladimir Putin is Satan, well, they watch Tucker Carlson and they say, guy. You know, when MAGA is saying, nope, we got to support Israel till the end or whatever, they're saying, no, actually, Israel's murdering Palestinian children. That's wrong. You know, they are at odds with the establishment. MAGA itself, the bulk of MAGA is behind Trump and is pro-Israel and is just kind of rubber stamping whatever Trump does. But what you call dissident MAGA is the most important current in American politics. They're really people that are in that dissident MAGA space are people that are opposing the emerging low-wage police state and opposing the danger of a new world war. Doesn't mean they're right about everything. Doesn't mean they can't be or have problems, right? That's not the point. The point is they are at least at odds with the establishment. The left is not. On only one issue, Israel and Palestine, is the left any good. And the left goes out of their way to do Israel and Palestine as anti-working class and cringe as they right? They burn the American flags. They do everything they can to make sure their rallies send a giant fuck you to the American people. It's, just a woke, basically their message is America is an evil, racist country just like Israel, right? That's their message. They will never do a populist kind of, America, not Israel, money for jobs and schools, not weapons for Israel. They'll never do that, right? Instead, they are fighting white, cisgender hierarchy and, transgender rainbow flags for Palestine. And, they're never going to do anything that would possibly rally the American people against the big banks and corporations that run the country. They would never do that because then you're a fascist, you're a Nazi. And that's the other thing about them is anything that is remotely populist, anything that really opposes the establishment, they claim is fascist. So the left is completely gone. Dissident MAGA is the best political current. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has been the face of dissident MAGA. And she has been a huge supporter of Trump, questioning him and opposing him about Israel, questioning him and opposing him about the Epstein files. And yesterday she stepped down. Now, she stepped down, she said, because she's been receiving threats. That's the way she put it. She's been receiving threats. And I mean, we don't know the details of those threats, but we also know that it is widely believed among dissident MAGA that the reason that Charlie Kirk, the MAGA activist Charlie Kirk, killed was because his views on Israel were about to change. So to most dissident MAGA, it's going to appear that that Marjorie Taylor Greene stepped down in order to avoid being murdered by Israel. And that may be the case. I mean, I'm not saying it's not the case, but it doesn't matter because that's the way most dissident MAGA are going to interpret her stepping down. They're going to say, wow, they were going to Charlie Kirk her, and so she just had to leave office. That's how they're going to interpret it. And honestly, Marjorie Taylor Greene stepping down, come as a shocker, is actually a really brave and noble thing for her to do. And it's probably the smartest thing for her to do. Why? Because if you'll notice over the last couple weeks, the establishment was starting to use Marjorie Taylor Greene against Trump, right? Even though Marjorie Taylor Greene, they used to consider her the QAnon lady. They used to consider Marjorie Taylor Greene anti-Semitic and fascist. And around the Epstein issue, suddenly she was getting some mainstream play. She went on Bill Maher's show. She went on The View. And they suddenly were promoting her in a mainstream way and using her against Donald Trump. Why? What in the world was going on there? It looks like there is some 3D chess going on the part of the establishment because they are hoping to remove Donald Trump, right? And they see Trump as not trustworthy. They'd like to remove Donald Trump, not contrary, as not as easily controlled as a Democrat might be or as J.D. Vance might be. And it looked like Marjorie Taylor Greene was being boosted by The View and by Bill Maher and by all these people who used to demonize her and insult her because they were hoping to divide the MAGA camp and use her against Trump. And that's why Trump denounced her so hard. The other side, he called her Marjorie Taylor Greene. And if you watched Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation video, she dropped a huge bombshell in there. But she said Trump is going to be impeached again. Now, at this point, there's no articles of impeachment. But she dropped that bombshell. She said there's going to be another impeachment proceeding Trump, even though he's threatening me, and I just can't do that. That's basically what she said. Now, what are they going to impeach Trump for? This is really bizarre. And she's the first person to have said there's going to be another impeachment proceeding against Trump. She raised the alarm. She basically told the world that behind closed doors, they've already decided there's going to be another Trump impeachment proceeding. That's huge. That's really, really huge. And basically, if you look at the way she's lined up, she would have to be supporting it. Right? Now, she didn't say this in her resignation. And she said, well, I've always been there for Trump. I spent millions of my own money going around supporting Trump and all of that. And she didn't say it, but what's implied is that she wouldn't be able to do that again because Trump is wanting to drive her out of office. Trump is calling her a traitor. And so the only place she would fit in the political, she would have to join the anti-Trump impeachment bandwagon, and she wasn't willing to do that. Right. And so the only way that she can stay true to her principles and not just go to the other side of these elites that she's run her whole campaign against, the side of Israel, the side of the FBI, the side of the Ukraine folks, the only way she can stay true to her principles is to leave politics, is to leave office. Because if she remains in office, at this point is pivot into the anti-Trump movement. And that's what brings me to Nick Fuentes. I believe Tucker Carlson is sincere. I don't like what he did to Cynthia McKinney, who's a good friend of mine. I hope that he realizes on some level that he was not good to her, and I hope that he apologizes to her someday. They're both great people, Cynthia McKinney and Tucker Carlson. But at one point when Tucker Carlson was arrested, Cynthia McKinney, and I hope that they can reconcile, and that he can apologize to her, and that she can forgive him, and that they can both realize they're at odds with the same political establishment. But other than some of the stuff he did when he was a regular Republican, I think that Tucker Carlson is a good guy. Candace Owens, I think she's a good person. I think, again, I don't agree with everything she's ever said or done, but I think she's a good person who means well. And there are a lot of people in this dissident MAGA camp. The reason they're there in what they say. Candace Taylor, she's a good friend of this show. She's MAGA, but she believes in what she's saying. She's an evangelical Christian. She lives in Georgia. She's come on this channel before. I've been on her channel before. She's been canceled, that's always a good sign, right? If somebody gets canceled, right? If the first thing you Google about somebody is, oh, they're a bad person, right? Candace Taylor, that you Google her, the first thing that comes up is, oh, she's a flat earther. She's a flat earther. She's not a flat earther. She interviewed one. Right. And she's been viciously canceled. Candace Taylor is just an honest conservative. She's an honest conservative Republican. Right. And she is anti-Israel, and she loves Russian President Putin. She's been denounced by the Jewish committee of the Republican Party of Georgia. They're calling her anti-Semitic. She's not anti-Semitic, so that's all a good sign. She's a sincere person. Right. And there are plenty of sincere people on the dissident MAGA side. Nick Fuentes is not one of them. And hear me say this. Nick Fuentes is not one of them. Right? There are plenty of sincere people in the dissident MAGA sphere. Not Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is character. He's playing a sarcastic, swarmy, adolescent teenage boy. And he gets on there, and it's insult comedy. It's shock jock bullshit. And the stuff that he has said about people in his own space, mind you, right? He calls Marjorie Taylor Greene Large Marge. I mean, that woman's in better shape than I could ever aspire to be. She exercises. I mean, she's in great shape, but he calls her fat. He calls her Large Marge. And he brings up shit about her divorce that is completely irrelevant. I don't care about her divorce. I'm not interested. The stuff he said about Candace Owens, right, who's another anti-Israel conservative just like him, the racism against Candace Owens, I mean, it is very extreme. I don't even want to repeat some of the stuff. I mean, in those circles, unfortunately, in the dissident MAGA space, there is a lot of racism, especially against immigrants and stuff like that. But, the racism that Nick Fuentes has unloaded on Candace Owens, not even somebody who disagrees with him, but somebody who agrees with him, another dissident MAGA, another anti-Israel conservative. I mean, the level of racism he's unloaded on her is absolutely massive. Nick Fuentes is not trust him one iota. I do not trust him one bit. And it doesn't matter, right? He right now, suddenly he's saying he likes Stalin. Oh, he loves Stalin. I don't care. I don't buy it. I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? And at the same time, he's repeating all the standard anti-communist. And now Nick Fuentes' latest thing is, first of all, he is giving these shrill anti-Trump tirades, that sound like something from the woke left. Fuck Trump. It's, he's evil. It's bullshit. It's all. And then he's calling for an alliance with the left, right? And that we need to ally with the left, right? in principle, I like the idea of people that advocate some kind of planned economy, you know, and you know, with the dissident MAGA. I like the idea of dissident MAGA folks breaking with their worship of capitalism. I like that, but not if it's led by Nick Fuentes, right? And I'm just telling you, Nick Fuentes is being boosted right now in ways that are very, very bizarre, right? Very, very, very bizarre. All kinds of people who don't agree with him are blasting him everywhere, kind of like they were doing with Marjorie Taylor Greene right before she stepped down. She was getting a lot of love from people who don't agree with her. And that I do not trust Nick Fuentes, and that it's just not serious politics. If you are serious about changing the country and making alliances, there is absolutely no way that talks. There are people out there that are racist, that are sincerely racist, that try to present racist politics and don't sound like Nick Fuentes, right? Nick Fuentes is there to psyop and psych up a layer of people. Another thing about Nick Fuentes that's interesting is that he's, for the most part, sounds like a nationalist, but he panders very hard to a layer of people called traditional Catholics or traditionalist Catholics. And these are Roman Catholics who feel that the Vatican has sold out, has abandoned true Catholic principles. And there's a lot of traditional Catholics out there. And it's a very big tent, okay? And some traditional Catholics, for example, there's a I was in Iran. I was going to Iran many times. And E. Michael Jones is well respected in Iran, and he's written a lot of books about how capitalism goes against the Catholic faith. I would say he very much is what you would call anti-Semitic. I mean, he does really do believe the Jews are the problem. So I obviously don't promote any kind of ethnic bigotry, but in his traditional Catholicism, anti-Semitism, he is saying, and he is anti-imperialist to some degree or other, right? He says that Iran is a good country where they have an economy that serves religious principles. He stands with the Palestinians. He's something different, okay? And there are some trad Catholics like him, but that's not all trad Catholics. Trad Catholicism is a very big tent, and FBI agents, and I'm not exaggerating. There are sections of the FBI that are trad Catholics, and they have a neocon worldview. All that it means to them to be trad Catholics is that they think the Catholic Church is too woke and not anti-LGBT enough and not anti-abortion enough and too tolerant of cultural liberalism. And also, they're fanatically anti-communist, and they're proud of the FBI's COINTELPRO because they were fighting Satan, fighting the commies, right? They're proud of killing Fred Hampton. They're proud of all of that because they're all commies, right? Catholics are just neocon fanatical anti-communists who there's a layer of anti-Semitism and a layer of ultra religious Catholicism mixed in with their neocon worldview. And that's probably most of these forces. The bulk of trad Catholics are not anti-imperialist at all. There's a big layer of them that think that like Russia, but that's not because they understand Russia. They like Russia because liberals don't like it and they see it as conservative. And a bunch of them have turned against Russia because they found out abortion is legal there, right? I mean, they're not at all anti-imperialist in their principles. They still have it in their head that communism is the greatest evil that ever existed. And, they have Cold War views, and that leads them to support U.S. foreign policy. And even that E. Michael Jones guy, I saw him on a stream on Press TV one time during USA was attacking Iran, and he said, "Oh, they're attacking Iran. They should be attacking Venezuela. Those are atheist communists in Venezuela. That's who they should be bombing, not Iran." It's like Iran and Venezuela are best friends, and Maduro's not an atheist. What the fuck is wrong with you? But that's trad Catholicism is not a good scene. It's just not a good scene. There are some people in it that are smarter than others. I would say, again, there's a layer of people that are kind of anti-imperialist like E. Michael Jones, but the bulk of trad Catholics are not good, and it's got over it, right? It is almost a faction within the FBI. It's a layer of FBI agents, I mean, that's how it is there. I mean, again, it's a diverse crew. There's some layers of trad Catholicism that are pacifists that work with the Catholic worker movement, And there are layers of trad Catholicism that really like Alexander Dugin and are practically Orthodox. It's a really big tent. But other than trad Catholicism seems to be who Nick Fuentes pivots toward. And that is a space that is FBI'd up like you would not believe. All right. And openly, they're proud of it. There's a lot of FBI agents that are trad Catholics. And the bulk of trad Catholics don't have an anti-imperialist bone in their body. It's just a right-wing. And it's interesting because Amy Coney Barrett, the U.S. Supreme Court Justice, she's technically not Catholic. I mean, she may be a member of a Catholic church, but she's actually part of People of Praise, which is like an evangelical community that like has infiltrated the Catholic Church. And I'd say the neocon Catholics in the government, or former Catholics like Mike Barrett, they're not trad Catholics. They're what you would call they're from that other section, that like evangelical Pentecostal infiltration of Catholicism, which is very interesting. I think Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence finally broke with the Catholic Church, but for many years they were part of like Pentecostal circles within the. Amy Coney Barrett still calls herself a Catholic, but she's on the National Board of People of Praise, which is like a Pentecostal organization within the Catholic Church. It's all very interesting. But regardless, Nick Fuentes is not a good dude. He's not a good dude, and he's not sincere. And he is psyching up dissident MAGA to burn their bridges with MAGA. Okay? Look, the reason that when Trump got into office, Pam Bondi passed her statement about not enforcing the Foreign Agents Registration Act, that was because there were a number of people in the MAGA movement who raised that issue. And the reason that Tulsi is the intelligence director is because there were many people who were anti-war within the MAGA movement who said that. And, and Nick Fuentes' orientation is he's basically just telling all of the dissident MAGA to give their middle finger to MAGA as quickly as they can and seek an alliance with the left, which is not really going to happen, right? There are people on the left like Jimmy Dore are controlled, right? There's no leftist institution, no communist group, no socialist party is going to go, oh, Nick Fuentes wants an alliance and run and be friendly with it. It's not going to happen. But he is leading all of the dissident MAGA to burn their bridge at a time when it appears the White House could be on the verge of ending the Ukraine war. And that's the other thing. This deal, this 28-point deal that has been raised, it's the first time we're seeing a realistic deal for ending the Ukraine war. Now, Russia, there's some issues there that still need to be worked out. Those 28 points, apparently it's based on what was discussed in Alaska. Those 28 points are realistic points. You could actually end the Ukraine war on the basis of some of what's been proposed there. And it very well could be that the Ukraine war ends. Donald Trump told the Ukrainian government they have until Thursday, Thanksgiving, to agree to the deal, or else they're fighting Russia on their own. That's what he said. And it's kind of expected at this point that the European Union and Ukraine will reject the deal. But then we have to see, will Trump actually stick to his word and say, all right, you had your chance, you're fighting Russia on your own, and cut off U.S. support? Will that actually happen? If that happens, that's huge. And I think there's a very good chance that that's what will happen, that Ukraine will reject the deal because, they're dominated by British interests in particular and other forces, and they'll reject the deal, and Trump will pull U.S. aid, and Ukraine will be on their own, and Russia will then completely overrun Ukraine. And that's on. And I think that if you look at what's going on the battlefield right now, Russia is kicking Ukraine's ass. Russia's kicking Ukraine's ass, and this is Trump's out. This is Trump's way for it to not be on him when Ukraine just goes away, right? I mean, that's the situation there. That that Russia's winning. They've already, the new republics are part of Russia. And Ukraine, they say no to the deal. Trump says, all right, you're on your own. Bye. See ya. And when Ukraine falls, and just completely falls, no one can blame Trump for it. He can say, look, they had their out. We could have prevented it. We could have drawn the border here and everything would have been fine. And you guys chose to jump off a cliff. That's on you. Right? Look, there is, and this is what I've said about the Ukraine war from the beginning. Trump, the reason it's so long is Trump is doing damage control. He wants to end this in a way that he looks good. That's just not possible, unfortunately. And I think he's realizing that. I think the White House has realized there is no way that they end this Ukraine war and don't get accused of selling out to Putin, letting those Ukrainians die. It's going to be endless, right? It's going to be, what an awful, Trump left those people out to die. He doesn't care about them. He works for Putin. That's what's going to be no matter what, right? And that I almost expect, even if the peace deal does go through, I expect that there will be like a false flag attack in Ukraine that gets blamed on Russia. So they say, oh, look, Russia murdered all these Ukrainians even after they signed the deal. There'll be something. It'll be almost like when Biden pulled out of Afghanistan, right? You remember that forces behind the scenes within the U.S. everything they could to make the Afghan pullout a disaster because they wanted to maintain the U.S. military presence there. And they wanted the memo to be sent out that the USA needs to occupy countries, and the military-industrial complex went out of their way to make the Afghan pullout an absolute disaster in order to hurt the Biden administration, in order to push for regime change wars, etc. The same thing will happen with Ukraine. They're going to do it, and they will do it in the most painful way possible, and there'll be endless mainstream media propaganda about how awful Trump is for abandoning Ukraine. That's just how it's going to happen. And Trump knows that, and there's really nothing Trump can do about it. However, if he gives Ukraine an ultimatum and they don't take it, and then Ukraine just gets pummeled, then they can't blame Trump for it. And that's Trump's out, right? Ukraine should have listened to me. I had a deal made for them that would have worked. That seems to be what's going on there. But Marjorie Taylor Greene has found a way that she can leave Congress and she won't be sucked into the anti-Trump opposition. Whereas Nick Fuentes is trying to lead dissident the anti-Trump movement. And that's very, very, very dangerous. That is very, 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 very dangerous. I do not trust Nick Fuentes one iota. I do not trust him. And that, the insult comedy and the way he sounds like a 12-year-old boy. How old is the guy? He's an adult. He's quite old, but he sounds like he's 12, and he's on there being sarcastic and insulting people after people who agree with him in the most vicious, personal, hateful way. I do not trust Nick Fuentes. I don't. And I want to add a couple other things, right? I'll add a couple other observations about the political scene, and then I'll tell you what we can do. Another couple observations about the political scene to be aware of. The fake communist groups in the last year or so, right? There's the old communist groups that have all fallen apart. There's a couple sleeper communist organizations. I call them sleeper organizations. Now, what is a sleeper, right? In and intelligence and terrorism terminology, they talk about what are called sleeper cells. It's a group of people that are in a country and they're just living their lives. And then one day, they get a message, John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. And they awaken and they commit their act, right? That's a sleeper cell. And in movie terminology, if there is a movie that's a big hit that nobody sees, right? It's just a movie that everyone just kind of ignored, but then it gets to the box office and people are like, wow, this is amazing. They call it a sleeper hit if you didn't see it coming, right? And there are a couple communist groups, one in particular, the Revolutionary Communists of America, RCA. These are sleepers, meaning that as the communist groups that used to exist have just faded into nothing and fallen apart. Created with social media, a couple little communist groups that don't serve any real purpose. They're not educating people. They are just scare porn for conservatives. Revolutionary Communists of America, right? You go to their website, you're not going to learn anything from them. They're just a group of Trotskyites running around with red flags. Okay? But they scare the hell out of conservatives. Hammer, sickle, red flags. We are communists, right? And, you know, they're promoted very widely in social media. Their stuff is blasted. And Vivek Ramaswamy made a point of buying one of their newspapers. I am convinced they are what's called a sleeper, meaning that the ruling class is trying, you know, they, for different reasons, for different propaganda, for different internal ruling class fights, they may need a group of people with red flags, boogeymen, and be scary at some point. So they're forming a sleeper, right? And they've got a collection of people that, you know, the group is probably very infiltrated and controlled. And at some point, they will activate them and use them for some kind of provocation, right? Kind of like January 6th, kind of like Charlottesville or something. You know, but for now, they're just kind of collecting people's information. They're getting people orders. Occasionally they have a little scare porn rally where they're out there with hammer and sickles. We're communists, right? They're not educating anybody about imperialism. They're not educating anyone about anything. There's no political education that goes on. That should be a bing, bing, bing red flag. If you see a political organization that is not engaging in any education and they are not educating anybody about it, that should be like an alarm bell that they're phoning. Right? I mean, nobody in America knows anything about Marxist economics, about communism, Trotsky, Lenin. No one knows anything about that. So if you see a group of people that are organizing and they're like, yes, we are communists, join us, and there's no education that goes on, that should be like a bing, 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 a dead ringer. Sleeper, right? At some point, they're going to use them for something. But for now, they're just kind of gathering people and getting them used to taking orders, and that's what there are. And there's a couple others like this. You know, there's like one communist group that kind of liquidated and dissolved and then is like reborn, and all of a sudden they're super woke. There's another communist group that was recently formed, and these right? I would avoid them like the plague. If there's a group that is out there speaking in the name of communism, but it's not educating anyone about anything, but it's just being boosted everywhere. Look at them, they're communists. Very dangerous. Very, very, very dangerous. And right now, being a communist in America is not helpful, right? Being a communist in America, to most Americans, communist just means woke. That's what it means to most Americans. The actual communist governments have really changed their ideology. They're not doing the dialectical materialist, you know, struggle, relentlessly destroy everything thing. They're not doing that anymore. They're promoting a message that sounds a lot like CPI. Build up, invest in community. They're building up a pro-growth message. So if someone's running around with hammers and sickles right now, that basically means that they're not connected with what any communist government is doing, and they're most likely just kind of creating scare porn for conservatives. They're a sleeper that is going to be used for provocations at some point. So that's the other thing to be aware of. And there is a huge, and this is one thing that is like, this doesn't make any sense. There's a huge overlap between the sleeper communist groups and Nick Fuentes. That makes no sense. Sleeper communist groups, they seem to just be constantly paying attention to Nick Fuentes, fighting with Nick Fuentes, talking like Nick Fuentes. That's very weird. The other thing is that within this dissident MAGA space, I'll say this also, there is something unhealthy. Right? It's unhealthy. There's an unhealthy current, right? Which may not be dominant. And I'm not even saying this is necessarily a conspiracy, but it exists. And it's just something to be aware of. That, you know, look, obviously, sexual assault, rape, these things are awful things. They're horrible, traumatic experiences. They're horrible. Unfortunately, of Netflix films, podcasts, books, there's a whole universe that's, you know, what you call like true crime, of people that sit around watching videos and listening to audiobooks and reading physical books and watching television programs about serial killers, rapists, pedophiles, stuff like that, right? That exists, of this kind of like trauma universe of people that are just constantly thinking about perverts and pedophiles, and, you know, and it exists, right? Unfortunately. And that was part of the Me Too thing, the Me Too universe, right? Well, you got to believe women, people that have a traumatic experience. They're really hurt that no one believed them or no one took them seriously. So you've got to believe women. They get very upset, right? And that if you listen to some of what Marjorie Taylor Greene said in her resignation speech, right? She started out by saying how anti-abortion she is, which is interesting. So that's not a feminist position. But then from there, she started talking about how she feels like she's a battered wife, and if you listen to this member of Congress, this woman, Nancy Mace, right? Nancy Mace, I don't know the details of it. I don't want to know, and I don't care. I really have no interest in her divorce, but she is fighting with her ex-husband right now. And it's something about nude photos or something, and he's claiming she blackmailed him, and I don't even know, and I don't care, okay? But she's having this very public fight with her ex-husband that is using a lot of the language that seems to have come from Me Too about, like, this is an abuser, blackmail. I don't know what it is, but it's not good. It's not good, right? And there's a lot, it seems like in the dissident MAGA spaces, there's a layer of this kind of trauma politics of like, predators are everywhere. Predators are going to come get me. I'm traumatized. And look, in the age that we're in, where social media has the ability to blast accusations everywhere, facts matter. Did someone actually do what they're accused of? Not, right? Facts actually matter, right? And that we saw and how Me Too could be manipulated. Unfortunately, obviously, sexual harassment is a horrible, horrible thing. And for many years and in many workplaces and in the entertainment industry, there was kind of a blind eye turned to it. Okay. But Me Too, there's a reason it started as soon as Donald Trump was president, and there's a reason it ended as soon as Joe Biden became the nominee. They never cared about Tara Reade. They never cared about what she went through. They never believed her. They believed women, except Tara Reade, right? And many people looked at the trial of Donald Trump here in New York, where he was accused of something, and they said that's that, and they kind of rolled their eyes on that case, right? And that Me Too, there were people who were accused, and the accusations went away in 2 days because mainstream media didn't choose to highlight them. And there were people that were accused of very, very minor things that had to step down from office, that had to have their careers destroyed. There was a lot of selective interpretation of Me Too, and there's no way around that. I mean, there absolutely was. There's a lot of games that got played in Me Too. Yes, there were cases where somebody was just a predator and got called out on it. Sure. But there were also a lot of cases of people who their behavior was rather mild, but it destroyed them. And there were cases of people who did some serious stuff, and the media just chose not to destroy them over it. That went on. And I'm listening to some of the dissident MAGA circles, and I'm hearing true crime mindset. I'm hearing there's predators everywhere. And I'm hearing we got to think. We got to be clear-headed. Look, I love a good show. I love a fiery speech. I love a good rock and roll song. But in this day and age, in which there is a lot of material out there designed to manipulate us and get us to hate certain people and get us to rally behind others, right? You absolutely have to talk about facts. And I hear some of the stuff from Anna Paula Luna, from Nancy Mace, from Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it worries me. The Epstein case is a great example of American politics at its worst. And one thing stand, right, is that, you and I, we've been talking about Epstein for years. We've been talking about it from the day he killed himself in prison. We were saying he didn't kill himself. We were saying this is an example of the American corrupt political establishment, right? We've been talking about the Epstein case for years, right? But we all know that there were a bunch of people who, if you said Jeffrey Epstein, it's a conspiracy theory. You got that from Alex Jones. There's no such thing as a Jeffrey Epstein. That's all a crazy conspiracy theory in your head. That's Russian propaganda. There's no such thing as a Jeffrey Epstein. And then acted and didn't release the Epstein files. Suddenly they're like, wow, have you ever heard of Jeffrey Epstein? Oh my God, there's this guy named Jeffrey Epstein. And it's frustrating. Because, first of all, they just discovered who he is. Now that he's suddenly something that can be used against Trump, and he's something the mainstream media is discussing and using it against Trump, suddenly they know who it is. And they don't know the whole fucking story. The Jeffrey Epstein stuff is pretty serious, right? Condemnation, not of Trump. It's a condemnation of the entire political system, that this guy, this well-embedded guy, did what he did, got a sweetheart deal when he was convicted, got convicted again, and then killed himself. I mean, that is a really but these people don't know that. All they know is there's this like famous sex pervert named Jeff Epstein, and Trump is friends with him, Hitler, and he's just like Putin. And it's like, no, Jeffrey Epstein most likely worked for Mossad, and he was running a blackmail operation, an effective blackmail operation, and he was very well connected in America's circles. He was a top Wall Street banker who was running a very elaborate blackmail operation, and had his fingers in all kinds of political circles. Jeffrey Epstein, he was quite a figure. And if you actually look at the details of the case, it is a huge condemnation of our whole political system. But these people who just a year ago would have told you there's no such thing as Jeffrey Epstein, stop believing conspiracy. Now, suddenly they know who Jeffrey Epstein is, and all they know is that there's this perverted guy who was a friend of Trump. Trump must be a pervert, just like that perverted guy who had an airplane. And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating to see that, right? It's really frustrating to see that. So, I don't know. All that I can say, and I will just end with this, and it's not, I'm really not ending. I'm actually just kind of, we're just starting, you could say, is that that the Center for Political Innovation is not a political party. We do not run candidates for office. We do not endorse candidates. We are an educational project. That's what we are. We need to embrace that role. No matter who the president is, no matter who's in Congress, we're going to be out there promoting anti-imperialism, educating people about anti-imperialism. That's what we're going to be doing. And we just have to keep doing that. And, I'm not happy to see Marjorie Taylor Greene step down, but I am happy that she found a way to leave Congress and not become a tool of the people that want to remove Trump for bad reasons. There's plenty of reasons to be mad at Trump, but the drive to remove him is because they're afraid he might make peace with Russia. They're afraid he might not, the FBI, just go after and devastate anti-imperialists. The Stop Trump movement is coming from a bad place. And Marjorie Taylor Greene found a way to make her exit from Congress and not get caught up in that. And she revealed that there's going to be another impeachment. And I think that she will continue to be a voice for dissident MAGA. I think she will. I think that she will continue to be a voice for dissident MAGA. And I don't think we've heard the last of Marjorie Taylor Greene. But the main thing is, our organization, we don't have to get caught up in this. We don't. We are just going to keep doing what we've always been doing, promoting peace with Russia, promoting money for jobs and schools for America, not weapons for Israel, standing with important anti-imperialist and anti-war voices who are under attack, like the Uhuru movement, Dr. Hak Jahan, who's being imprisoned right now in South Korea, such an important activist for peace on the Korean Peninsula. We're just going to continue doing what we're doing. And we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of all of this, right? We agree dissident MAGA are right in their criticisms of Trump. However, there is some shady stuff going on right now with Nick Fuentes, some shady stuff going on with these sleeper communist groups. We don't have to get caught up in any of that. We can just focus on doing what we're doing. And that is what we're going to do. So I also tonight, since it is Saturday night, would be a great time to talk about, since we're focusing on doing what we're doing, there are 4 types of political meetings that one can have. And I just wanted to talk about what those 4 types are. If you're doing real organizing in real life, you can have 4 types of political meetings. We used to say 3. Now, there are 4 types of political meetings that one can have when you're organizing. There's the street meeting, there is the study meeting, there is the public meeting, and then there is the house party. So let's just go over what these different types of political meetings are like. The street meeting, right? This is a really important, this is we do a lot of these as CPI, these national days of action. They're basically street meetings. Where there's a lot of foot traffic. There's a lot of people walking by. You have visual materials, eye-catching signs, flags, placards. You have a bullhorn, sound equipment. You have leaflets or palm cards to hand out. And you have various people get on the bullhorn and give 3 to 5 minutes, and you stick to the main points. They're pretty repetitive, right? If you're having a national day of action for peace with Russia, you're not there to, go over the entire history of the world. You're there to just say, we want peace with Russia. And people take turns getting on the bullhorn and have peace with Russia. And we've been doing this in CPI, street meetings, right? This goes back to soapboxes, when socialists used to stand on soapboxes and preach socialism, right? There used to be a whole art of this, right? Of the man on the soapbox who is, pointing and agitating, that's a whole tradition, right? Union Square in New York City used to be a center of soapboxes, soapbox speakers, soapbox agitators. And in fact, even up to today in London, in Hyde Park, they have what's called Speaker's Corner, and it's where people gather to give speeches. And there's a whole tradition, right? One thing that the soapbox speakers would do is they would speak like this with their mouth up, right? Because the idea is to have their voice go over the heads of the people. They're not talking up. Another thing that soapbox agitators do is that there's hecklers, right? Soapbox agitators have what are called hecklers. People shout back at them. So what the soapbox agitator will do is a heckler will shout something, and then the soapbox agitator will then state the argument that the heckler is giving, right? And then answer it, right? And on the soapbox, and in order to keep control of it. So he's up there saying, we need socialism. Socialism is the future. We need a planned economy. The banks and the factories got to be organized by the people. And one guy in the audience shouts, socialism, that doesn't work anywhere. And he says, that man there has just said, and then he restates the man's argument more articulately than the man is putting forward the notion that socialism has failed everywhere it's ever been tried. He looks at the fall of the Soviet Union. He looks at some of the economic disasters like China's Great Leap Forward, and he makes the argument that there is a flaw, and he then states the argument of the heckler more effectively and eloquently than the heckler is capable of speaking and articulating it, to show that he knows what the argument is and he's acknowledging it. And then from there, and he says, well, my response to this argument, sir, and then he knocks it down. There's a whole art of the soapbox speakers, a whole tradition in the history of socialism. You read about Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, about Joe Hill and the Wobblies. You read about William Z. Foster, the soapbox speaker. It was a whole history there. And one of my frustrations with the groups I was in was part of the reason I learned that they didn't was because when these communist groups were formed, everybody did that. It used to just be something that happened. It used to be up until the 60s and 70s. If you ever went to Union Square, there'd be somebody standing on a ladder or somebody standing on a soapbox or on a stool. Assumed that people would do that. So people that were trying to build an organization, they focused on having big mobilizations and rallies. And a street meeting is not a demonstration. And that's important, right? A street meeting is very different than a demonstration. What is a demonstration? Where does the term demonstration come from? Well, demonstration is a word that goes back to the Napoleonic Wars. When Napoleon would go out to fight the British or go out to fight the Germans or whoever he was fighting, before the two armies with their muskets would start shooting at each other, they would march around and they would march around, and this section would go here, and they'd have perfect formation in their marching to demonstrate their capabilities. Look how disciplined our army is. Look at all these guns we've got. Look how perfectly they can march. They would demonstrate. They would have a demonstration of a battle. Right? That's actually in the era of the Napoleonic Wars, and the era of muskets and wars. Prior to a battle, two armies would meet, and then they would do all kinds of elaborate marches and formations and demonstrate just how effective their army was, just how many bayonets they had, everything, to, like, the idea was to scare the other army. And it worked sometimes. There was a lot of desertion in those days. And sometimes, they'd line up one group and there'd be, the army they're facing, they're all marching in elaborate formation and they've all got their guns, and people would be like, I'm out of here. I'm getting out of here. And they'd get the hell out of there, right? And that was the hope, right? Is that you demonstrate politics. A demonstration is when you try to get as many people as you possibly can, a huge, huge crowd, to show public support for your cause. You are demonstrating to your opponents that, look at all these people who support me, and not only support me, they support me enough to come and be part of my big giant crowd. That's what a demonstration is. A street meeting is not a demonstration. A street meeting is a place to spread the message of the organization, right? It's not about getting as many people there. And demonstrations, you often want to have a very broad message, because you don't want to make it about, your specific organization. You want to make it as many people as possible. You want that crowd to be as big as you possibly can have it, because it's a demonstration. Whereas with a street meeting, you just need for organization. You need something catchy, a nice big sign, a flag, a poster, right? You need a bullhorn, and you need leaflets to pass out to people that are going by. And that's a demonstration. A demonstration, that's not a demonstration, that's a street meeting. And that's the first type of political meeting that you can have, is a street meeting. Then after that, there's what's called a study meeting. A study meeting is when you get together and you study a text. You read a text, right? Right now in CPI, we've been having Khrushchevism reading groups where people get together and they read this book. They're reading it, right? And this is a study meeting, right? And we also have, there's people that read Marx together. There's people that read the Bible together, right? It's like you get together and you read a text, right? It's important that you don't video record a study meeting, because you don't want people to feel embarrassed to ask questions, right? People are not familiar with these ideas, and that is not their fault. And that's just, people are being video recorded. They're going to be afraid of looking stupid. They're going to be afraid of being judged. So you cannot record a study meeting. Study meetings need to be as open as possible, and they need to be small. You don't have a huge number of people at a study meeting, 4 or 5, maybe 10 or 12, but they shouldn't be huge. Shouldn't be huge. Study meetings should not be huge, right? Is in the study meeting, you read a text, you either read it beforehand and come with notes, or you just read it there in the meeting, and you read it and you discuss, and you read it and you discuss. It's important that when you have a study meeting, you have both new members and experienced members there, right? If it's all new members, they're going to be lost. They're not going to know what's going on. And if it's only experienced members, they've all read it before, right? And the point is that you're helping teach the idea to the new members. You're helping the experienced members learn to articulate. They're learning together. And it's really the experience of doing it together. It's people playing off each other. And in a study meeting, there are no stupid questions, right? Honestly, I will say this, and I hope I don't embarrass anyone when I say this. When someone asks what somebody else might consider to be a stupid question at a study meeting, that's when I know I'm teaching somebody. And it actually, as somebody who has done a lot of study meetings and a lot of classes, sometimes the best feeling in the world is when someone asks a question that should be obvious, right? They ask that question, and I know this person is really unfamiliar with this content. And that's why it's so important to have them there, right? It actually feels good when someone says, wait a second, I don't understand. Who was this Lenin guy? When someone says, what do you mean World War I? What was World War I? That's okay. And that means they need to be educated. So that's good. There should be no stupid questions in study meetings. Humor is appreciated. Jokes, people joking. And everyone needs to get an opportunity to speak. Everyone needs to get an opportunity to speak, right? That's really important in a study meeting. You can't have it be dominated by one person. You can't. It cannot. It needs to be everyone's given a chance to speak. Go around. No one gets interrupted by other people. And you dig into a text that you're reading, and you talk about it. You go back and forth about it. That's the brilliance of a study meeting. That's an important part of a meeting, a study meeting. The next type of meeting is a public meeting. And a public meeting is a show. It's a performance. And you have to be aware that that's what it is. I see a lot of groups that have public meetings, and they don't seem to realize it's a show. They kind of have it in their head, well, this is this thing we do with our friends or something. No, if you're having a public meeting, it's a show. And it's a show, right? People are gathering and you are putting on a show to teach people about your right? And it has to be an interesting show. It has to be a show that they can relate to. It has to be a show that holds their attention. You have to build it has to be a good show. And if you don't understand that a public meeting is a show, you're completely lost. One thing about public meetings have to have music. They absolutely must have music. If you have a public meeting without music, it doesn't work. And I've done, this is my experience. I've been to many public political meetings that do not have music, and it just doesn't work. You have to have somebody there with a guitar or a violin or a piano keyboard or something. You have to have music to some degree or other. It changes the way people interact. Music is very special. Go read what Plato wrote about stuff. Like, music changes the atmosphere in a room. Music, people on a subconscious level, you have to have music. If you don't have music at a public meeting, once the music starts playing, people start engaging. And in my experience, right, with all due respect to hip hop, classical music, rock music, in my experience, the best type of music for a political meeting, I'm bringing my own bias here, is folk music. Why? Because folk music tends to be music that people can sing together, people involved, right? Right. And that's the best thing about it. If you can, at your political meeting, not just have music that's a pure performance, but music where the audience is singing along, right? Where the audience is singing along, is clapping along, that is the best because it creates group cohesion. You're all on the same page. It creates kind of a fun experience, right? That's why do hymns always have very strong melodies? Why? Because everyone's got to be able to sing it. And, if it's not a very strong melody, people won't get the tune, right? Because, and the best music is folk music because it's music that is meant to be sung in groups. It's music that is simple, repetitive. That is ideal for a political meeting. Now, at a political meeting, you have a chair. And that's the person who welcomes everybody, and they introduce speakers. They run the Q&A session afterwards. And the chair is a very important person. The chair, they have to run the meeting. And often the chair needs to have an assistant of somebody who can tell them what to do or pass them notes or whatever. But they're the person kind of running the meeting. And in addition to that, you have to have what's called an activist report. You cannot have a good political meeting and every talk is about just an abstract topic or what's going on in politics or history or something. No. If you're building a real organization that's doing work, you have somebody get up and talk about absolutely have to have somebody give an activist report to show the work that the organization actually does, right? It can't be an abstract thing. You can have an abstract speech and all of that, but in addition to that, there absolutely has to, that's a good joke. That's a good joke, Ryan. That's good. I appreciate that. That's actually very funny, but you absolutely have to have an activist report. Another thing that you need is a testimonial. Right? You have to have somebody talk about why joining the group was good for them and tell their story of how they got involved in the organization, right? That is absolutely needed as well, right? You need somebody who says, I joined this group and here's what it was like. Here's what I thought before I joined the group. Here's what it was like afterwards. You need a testimonial. You have to have an activist report. You have to have a testimonial. But then the public meeting centers around a keynote presentation. And the keynote presentation is what the meeting is really about, the topic of the meeting, right? And that keynote presentation can be what's going on currently in politics. That keynote presentation can be historical. It can be abstract and philosophical. It can be anything. But the main speaker gives the keynote presentation. Sometimes the activist report and the testimonial before the keynote presentation. Sometimes you'll have the activist report, then the keynote, then the testimonial. Sometimes you can do it however you want. But the keynote presentation is the long speech, which should be about an hour. Maybe a little shorter than an hour, maybe a little longer than an hour. Should be about an hour, right? And then after the activist report, the testimonial, the keynote presentation, after some music has been played, you can then have a Q&A session. And the Q&A session is very important because that's when people can ask questions. That's when people can debate and all of that. That's very, very important. A public meeting is like a show. It is like you're putting on a show of your organization where you gather people together to express the organization's ideas, show people what the organization is about, bring them in, and bring them into the group, right? That's the idea of a public meeting. Now, the last type of meeting is a house party. And this is actually very important. I for a long time, I did not think of house parties. But, I remember when I was younger, when I was like high school age, I went to a couple like Democratic Party, like MoveOn.org house parties, kind of. And then I do remember going to a couple communist house parties when I was involved in communist stuff. And I know the John Birch Society, the far right organization, they were very famous for their house parties. And house parties, and I think the LaRouche group, I went to a house party that they did one time. House parties are actually a very, very good way to organize. So what it is somebody has their home, they open up their home, and they serve some good food, they serve some drinks, maybe alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, but, alcohol, whatever. I guess CPI, we generally don't have alcohol at our events, so we probably couldn't do that. But, good food, and a house party, the focus of the house party is people getting to know each other, hobnobbing, chatting with guests or whatever. And the conversation should not be entirely political. All right. The idea is somebody opens up their home, people come over, they eat food, they sit on the couch, they talk about their lives, they talk about movies, they talk about their boyfriend or their girlfriend. And it's just an opportunity for people to socialize, right? And for at least the first hour, there should not be a speech or anything like that, right? It should just be a fun get together at somebody's house to eat some good food and hobnob. At least an hour after it starts, right? You have one speaker, only one. And that speaker gets up and gives a political talk to the people and orients the people about what it is that they were gathered, what the purpose of the house party was. And that the speaker gives a political talk that is entertaining. It's not too long. And the idea is that the new people will appreciate it. It'll stimulate conversation afterwards. And kind of like at the center of the party is a political talk that should be about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. An hour is really pushing it. I don't think people at a house party are going to listen to an hour, right? And then you should have some kind of fun activity, maybe play board games or listen to music, or there should be fun activities after that, after that at the house party. And one of the good things about house parties is it's a great place to invite non-political people, right? People that if you say, hey, I'm having a political meeting, not interested, coworkers, friends, who would be scared to come to a political meeting. But if it's just coming over to the house of a coworker or a classmate, they would come over, they would like the good food. And heck, they might not even like the speech that's given. They may not even like the speech, but they can still have a good time and meet some people and have a good time talking to people. And house parties are a great place to meet new people. Now, there are different things people do at house parties. My understanding, the communist house parties that I went to, often what was done is, people would just kind of, talk about political cases that are going on. And, we would maybe make a statement, about what the party was doing. I know the John Birch Society, what they were famous for is they would have house parties for their books, right? They would publish a lot of books. And that, what they would do is the people would gather at the house and they would have the party. And then the 1 hour, the speaker was often the author of the book. If not, they were somebody who knew the book's content, and they would talk about the book. And then what the John Birch Society would do is they would sell the book, and they would have people mail it to their member of Congress, and they would have the envelopes all made, right? And they would sell the book, and people would buy it and stick in an envelope and have it, and then stick a sticker on it, and they would mail it to their members of Congress, right? And the idea was to get to sell as many books as possible. and have people buy it right there and stick it in an envelope to send it to their member of Congress, or buy it for their family members and take it home with them or whatever. And that a lot of the John Birch Society, their house parties were kind of intended to sell books, right? And, that is part of a thing with like multi-level marketing schemes. People have Tupperware parties and stuff like that. And that's what you got to be careful with that, right? As much as I like raising money and selling books, honestly, you don't want people to feel like they're at a Tupperware party, so I would actually want people to be a little cautious with stuff like that, right? That you don't want people to feel like they got tricked to come into your house to help raise money, right? You don't want that. You want people to actually have a good time, and you want the party to be fun and the food to be good, and people to not feel like they're obligated. They became a captive audience where they have to spend money. You don't want to do that, right? You want people to have a good time. So, the reason I decided to go over, those 4 types of political meetings is because CPI, we are an in real life organization, and that's what we want to do. And ideally, right? We're not there yet, but wouldn't it be great if we got to the point that every CPI innovation circle had one of these meetings every week? They had a house party every week. They had a public meeting every week. They had a study meeting every week, and they had a street meeting every week. Wouldn't that be amazing if in Chicago and Minneapolis and LA and New York City and Boston and wherever we had people, once a week we had a street meeting, once a week we had a study meeting, once a week we had a public meeting, and once a week we had a house party? That would mean we had a real organization that was really getting stuff done, and new people were coming to those meetings. New people were being met at the street meeting. New people were sitting down and studying the ideology. New people were filling up the hall for a public meeting. People were piling into someone's house for a house party. Wouldn't that be great? And that would be real organizing. See, the internet is a great place to learn and stuff like that. But when you're doing this, these types of meetings are designed to educate people about politics and bring them into a community, bring them into an organization. Right? That's the purpose of them, right? Street meetings, study meetings, public meetings, and house parties are all a great place to organize, right? Street meetings are about people who would never go looking for you, agitating, right, etc. Study meetings are people that you've already met and you're sitting down with them to read and learn the ideology. Public meetings are like shows that your organization puts on that are very exciting. House parties are fun and relaxing and a chance to just kind of hang out and eat good food and get to know people. And then there's a nice political speech that introduces people to the organization. It's a really exciting thing. We're having a public meeting January 11th in New Jersey. It is a public meeting that CPI is having, and we're having it in New Jersey. And I hope that you all come. And it's going to be a bit longer than a typical public meeting. It starts at 2 p.m. and it's going to end at 9 p.m., but we're going to have dinner. So it's not like a house party, but it's a longer than usual public meeting because it's kind of a national event that we're doing. And I hope you come. And we're getting better at organizing our public meetings. That's if you want to come to a political public meeting, there will be speeches, there will be music, there's actually going to be a food buffet, there's going to be all kinds of stuff. It's going to be absolutely great. You're going to leave with a free book and a couple free books, I think, and it's going to be absolutely awesome. So I hope that you will come to our public meeting that we're having January 11th in New Jersey. It's in Newark. It'll be near the Newark airport. I hope to see you there. And it looks like CPI is going to be having house parties around the country on March 15th for City Builders Day, right? That's the holiday that CPI declared when we formed our organization. The Ides of March, March 15th, is when Julius Caesar was assassinated. And we declared that to be a holiday. Because the narrative of the assassination of Julius Caesar and the fall of Rome is an important part of the Center for Political Innovation and our beliefs. So we thought it would be a good thing if this year on March 15th, we had house parties around the country where people got together, ate some good food, but then one CPI member gave kind of a presentation to everyone there, new people, members of the organization, coworkers, friends, about why Julius Caesar's assassination is a really important thing to understand if you want to understand what CPI is doing. So there you go. So that's what we're all about, right? At the end of the day, the fall of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Trump possibly making a deal. At the end of the day, we just have to build our movement. We are anti-imperialists. We are anti-imperialists to our core. We are organizing, dare to struggle, dare to win. And we just have to keep organizing. We just have to keep building this movement. We just have to stand with people that are under attack. We just have to keep promoting peace and anti-imperialism. That's what we got to do. And there's nothing else to it, right? I mean, we're not, at the end of the day, yes, we do want to highlight and amplify what's good. We like Tulsi Gabbard and a lot of what she does. We liked a lot of what Trump said on the campaign trail. Haven't been thrilled with how he's been governing so far, but we like the idea of a peace deal in Ukraine. We just got to keep organizing. We stand with Uhuru. We stand with Dr. Haq Jahan. We stand with people that are under attack for doing good work, and we organize and we build community, and that is what we're doing. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Join the Center for Political Innovation. That's us. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. We got Ryan in Kansas City. That was a good joke you made earlier. I did appreciate it. We got Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Good to see you, Lawrence. We got Red Axis in Ottawa, Susan in Canada, the Seasoned Noob in China, Charles Diane in Brooklyn, Palm Springs, California, the far east of Russia. Wow. Jenny in Cincinnati, Jane in New Zealand, John in Florida. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations, names and locations. We got Rose living in a cave. The south of the United States, the Kingfish himself, Ottawa, St. David's, Bermuda, dying. Are you all right, Charles? Sorry to hear that you're dying. DIYing. You're do-it-yourselfing. You're not dying. Okay, very good. Megan in Kansas City, good to see you. Hello, Caleb in Minneapolis. Good to see you. Fatima, good to see you. Jenny Lynn in Chicago. Good to see you. Just doing it yourselfing, DIYing. That's much better. I'm glad you're not dying, Charles. You're DIYing. That's much better. Much better for one's health to DIY than to die. Names and locations, anybody? Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right. All right. Now, we are here to answer people's questions. The best way to send questions is to buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the absolute best way, to send questions. Frederick, Maryland, Derry, New Hampshire. Very, very good. All right. So if you've got a question, you can buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send your question. So yeah, buy me a coffee. I guess we're going to start answering questions. 2 coffee questions came before this. Oh, David Fox is here, Bendigo, Australia. Good to see you, David. But yeah, at some point we're going to take a music break because my throat is, I'm going to need some water, but yeah, we'll do a couple questions first. The first question, it came from, oh, wow. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Hold up. All right. Not the first question. I guess. Okay. So we got, all right. Let me get some order here. There's a lot of questions, which is good. More questions is better. And please feel free to send more questions. All right. So first, Richard says he sent me a tweet. Richard sent me a tweet from the Department of Homeland Security. He said, rent is too high. There are tens of millions of criminal illegals in our country. Groceries cost too much. There are tens of millions of criminal illegals in our country. there aren't enough jobs, tens of millions of illegals in our country. It goes on, it goes on. It lists all these problems and saying the problem is linked to immigration. And he's asking my response to this tweet. And I look at this tweet and I'm like, well, first of all, not all of those things are directly linked to undocumented workers. For example, the rent being too high, right? The reason the rent is high in New York City is because they've figured out a way that people don't have to actually live in the apartments to make money. Real estate speculation. If the market was following its natural logic, what would happen was there's so many empty housing units in New York City. There's so many empty buildings in New York City that the rent should be dropping. So they're desperate to fill them up, but they don't. They don't have to, right? They've turned, it into a giant gambling casino, right? I have many times covered Billionaires Row in New York City, which is the most expensive apartments in the world. They cost like $20 million a month. I mean, it's insane. And those buildings are empty. No one can afford to live in them. These huge, expensive, fancy buildings right near Central Park, Billionaires Row, and nobody lives in them. That's insane, right? And that there are so many empty apartments in New York City, so many empty apartment buildings, because the big real estate companies, no one has to live in them. So I don't understand how that's not undocumented immigrants' fault. There's probably lots of undocumented immigrants that would like to live in those buildings. The problem is that real estate companies don't have to function according to basic laws of supply and demand in economics. The food being expensive. I mean, that's another issue, right? Well, I mean, our government buys loads of cheese and buries it in a cave. Our government buys loads of fruit and just destroys it in order to keep the prices high. That's not because of immigrants. Some of the stuff you could argue, like wages being driven down, like crime. I mean, sure, you could say something there. But why is there a huge inflow of undocumented workers into America? It's because of the economic demolition of South and Central America and neoliberal economics. So, that kind of rhetoric, it is a little bit annoying to see a government agency putting out like partisan political material, right? That is a little bit annoying. The DHS is not, in essence, an anti-immigration organization, right? I mean, you have Immigration Customs Enforcement, you have the Customs and Border Patrol, but DHS is the Department of Homeland Security. But that's part of what Trump is doing. He's politicizing the agencies. So that's my response to that from Richard. And then Penny sent a buy me a coffee, and she said, right? So Penny said, hold on. Penny said, China feed Americans ad Yangtze River Forum and Burkina Faso youths global robotic champs. She had two videos she wanted me to show. So I guess the first is on China feeding Americans at the Yangtze River Forum. So we'll put that on. We'll put that first video on. Okay. There we go. Just downloading that video. This is China feeding Americans Yangtze River Forum. So I don't quite know what it's about, but we're going to put it on because Penny sent in her Rumble rant. So here we go. All right. China feed Americans and Yangtze River Forum. Here we go.
美国，这个全球最富裕的国家之一，仍面临着饥饿的困扰。在这个国家，尽管食品供应过剩，却仍有4900万美国人健康的食物来提升生活品质，帮助美国从现在开始。
The 60,300-kilometer long Yangtze River sustains 40% of China's 5% of its national GDP. To discuss its protection, the Yangtze Culture Forum brought together some 300 experts from over 30 countries in Nanjing to discuss river ethics, conservation, and riverside civilizations. The event featured a report by the Xinhua think tank on harnessing rivers for national prosperity and public welfare. Publications Culture were launched during the forum, and an action plan for conserving aquatic organisms from the river to the ocean was presented. In the Belt and Road Dialogue Among Civilizations segment, international experts highlighted the key role of this Chinese mega project as an alternative for countries in the global south and international dynamics.
It is a world where the gap between developed and developed countries is widening, in a world where the inclusion of the most backward is not conceived. The FR alternative route gives countries in the global south, especially Latin America, the opportunity for development, financing, technology, cooperation, and technology transfer.
Experts emphasize that the initiative promotes an open and inclusive world where civilizational diversity is a driver of progress and not conflict.
It is like a new form of globalization in which all countries involved should benefit from this form of globalization in this context. I would like to mention the fact that we have a significant investment system, the launch of this ambitious project with more than $1.6 trillion already invested, and more than 60% of this investment was earmarked for construction. The building of bridges across our nations is intensifying trade, boosting economic growth, and raising the prosperity of our citizens.
Overall, this Yangtze culture form promotes ecological protection and harmonious development. For participants, this river plays a key role in fostering mutual learning between civilizations and somos e sendo a community with a shared future. From Berlin, China, and Saratan, Prensa Latina Television.
All right, and we'll show the robotics video later in the stream. Now, feel free to send more questions. More questions are always appreciated. Best way to send them is buy me a coffee. Now, somebody named Susan sent a question and asked, how do I assess the Black Panther Party of today? And I don't quite know what you mean. Are you referring to the new Black Panther Party? There is a formation called the New Black Panther Party that I believe was led by Malik Zulu Shabazz. Malik Zulu Shabazz was formerly a minister in the Nation of Islam. And he followed Dr. Khalid Muhammad, who had kind of a falling out with Minister Farrakhan. And I think it was around the year 2000, they broke away from the Nation of Islam, and then they formed the New Black Panther Party. I don't know that much about them. However, I did know years ago in Cleveland, there's a man who is now deceased, who was their leader in Cleveland, a guy named Abdul Kahar. And Abdul Kahar, I was very impressed with. He was a brilliant organizer. He had been a political prisoner. He was one of the Louisville Seven, and he'd been imprisoned in Kentucky, and he'd been part of the original Black Panther Party. And he was a brilliant man. He had converted to Islam. He was a Muslim. And he had a group of people in Cleveland that were part of the New Black Panther Party. And I liked him. He was great. I understand he's now passed on. But I always found him to be great to work with. And he had like a fact sheet he would hand out, myths about the New Black Panther Party. For example, one thing that he said is it was widely, I don't even know where this stuff is at now. I don't know what the New Black Panther Party is up to these days. But like, for example, one claim was that the New Black Panthers were a Muslim organization. And he said, technically, that's not true. Yes, Dr. Khalid Muhammad was a Muslim. Yes, Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz is a Muslim. But he said, we have Christians in the New Black Panther Party. We have, atheists in the New Black Panther Party. And the New Black Panther Party was not, he said, a Muslim organization. He also said that the New Black Panther Party, they said it was denounced by the original Black Panthers. That was not universally true. And he pointed that out as well, that I think some of the original Black Panthers, Bobby Seale had denounced the New Black Panther Party, but not all of them. And actually Elaine Brown, who was the woman who led the original Black Panthers. She was the only woman to ever be the chair of the original Black Panther Party. And she was chair in the late 70s and early 80s before they finally dissolved. Elaine Brown, she was, she came to Cleveland and gave a talk, and Abdul Kahar was quite friendly with her. She's not, I don't think she's associated with the new Black Panther Party, but they were friendly. And in Cleveland, the new Black Panther Party, I found them to be okay. I didn't find anything to be wrong with them. I did know that they were widely accused of being anti-Semitic, right? They were widely accused of being anti-Semitic, but I didn't hear anti-Semitism from them. I did not hear that. I didn't hear that from them. And I know that there was a guy in Philadelphia who was with them, who I guess was like during the Obama election, he said some very provocative things that Fox News used. And for a while, it seemed like during the Obama years, Fox News had a particular fixation on the new Black Panther Party and would highlight them. But honestly, I don't know what they're up to these days. I did meet Malik Zulu Shabazz a couple times. I did meet him a few times, and I always enjoyed. I thought his Fox News interviews were pretty good. I mean, he handled them pretty well. And I never really, I thought highly of Malik Zulu Shabazz. Is the new Black Panther Party still in existence? I know they're labeled a hate group, right? No, Malik Zulu Shabazz stepped down. He's no longer with the new Black Panther Party. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. And I don't really know what they're up to nowadays. It says that they are advocates of New Africanism, right? The Republic of New Africa. Okay. I honestly, when I knew the new Black Panther Party in Cleveland, that's when I knew them. I attended their summit at Cleveland State University, and I saw them as, I just saw them as they were people, some of whom had been in the original Black Panther Party, some of whom were around like Black nationalism and the Nation of Islam. And it just seemed like an attempt to build a new organization. I was impressed, I will say, with their summit that they did at Cleveland State University that I went to. I was just disappointed because Malik Zulu Shabazz was supposed to be the speaker, but he didn't end up coming. But I did meet Malik Zulu Shabazz. I think when I went to Ferguson, he was there. And I also met him in Baltimore years ago. So, I don't know. I mean, the new Black Panther Party is one formation. What's interesting is apparently they are not the only group that tries to kind of be the inheritors of the Black Panther Party. For example, there was a group called the Black Riders Liberation Party. I think they're in Los Angeles. I don't know if they're still around. Black Riders Liberation Party, right? And they were, I think, Black Riders Liberation Party is a Black nationalist organization. So they still exist, and they're kind of another Black Panther formation. There's the New African Vanguard Movement, right? And then there was a group that it was called the Association of Black Panthers or something. And, they were around, and they were interesting. They just seemed to do a lot of charity and community work. So I think it was called the Association of Black Panthers or something like that. And they were in the DC area, I think years ago I watched C-SPAN. They had a woman from something. It was like the Association of Black Panthers or something. And she basically said, we run a scholarship program, right? We run a scholarship program for Black youth. And she was just on C-SPAN, and she just talked about, we have a scholarship program for young Black people and, young Black high school kids to go to college, and we do this and that. And then the callers were angry, defensive white people. And they were calling in, well, if you're so oppressed, how come I don't have a job? And it was she wasn't saying anything wildly political. It was there is, one thing that I will say, it's part of the, I talked on this stream earlier about Forrest Gump, the movie Forrest Gump. The Black Panther Party in Forrest Gump is portrayed as a group of Black people that want to kill white people, right? And that the Black Panther Party that originally existed was a Marxist-Leninist formation that had a lot of white supporters that raised money from white people that, Fred Hampton even had the Rainbow Coalition, and they had different organizations. They had the whole theory of intercommunalism, and it was just, but when I was a kid, there were a lot of, I remember I would hear a lot of, young white men, young high school age white men would say, oh, they always tell us white people are bad because of the KKK. Well, you know, the black people had the Black Panthers. Well, the Black Panthers were not, they were not like the KKK. They didn't go around murdering white people, you know, but, you know, so there was a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of confusion about them. But yeah, Marlon Brando donated money to the Black Panther Party. John Lennon donated money to the Black Panther Party. They raised a lot of money from Hollywood. They got money from Gaddafi in Libya as well. And they were, you know, the Black Panthers, I mean, in a lot of ways, the Black Panthers, you know, I guess the first thing that the Black Panthers ever did is they had the first thing that kind of made them national news is they had their armed patrols going on in California. So Ronald Reagan was hoping to pass gun control legislation to suppress them. And so they did what was legal at the time. Now this would be completely illegal. You know, and they marched into the state capitol building with their guns in full uniform to oppose the law. And that like created national attention, and they wore uniforms. And they very much, the Black Panthers were kind of a U.S. incarnation of the third world Marxist, Leninist, anti-imperialist current that was in existence at the time. Countries like Cuba, countries like North Korea, countries like Libya under Gaddafi, like the third world anti-imperialism. I know that the Uhuru movement, right? They actually very much claim the legacy of the Black Panthers. I guess before he died, Huey Newton came to a Uhuru meeting with Chairman O'Malley and said basically there used to be the Black Panther Party. Now there's the African People's Socialist Party. And so they, in a lot of ways, claim the lineage and argue that they are the rightful inheritors of the Black Panther Party. And they have I mean, if Huey Newton gave them their blessing, that's a pretty strong argument in their favor. So there's a lot of different groups that claim the Black Panther Party's lineage as their lineage. The New Black Panther Party is one of those formations. And, you know, my experience was only with them in Cleveland. That's the only place I really knew them as organizers. And my experience was only good. You know, Abdul Kahar was a great guy. And I guess before the New Black Panther Party had even been formed, you know, he was known as, you know, a local activist in Cleveland. You know, yeah. So, and there was, from what I understand, there was in Cleveland for years ago, there was a guy named Ahmed Evans, right? Ahmed Evans was his name. And he was a Black nationalist in Cleveland, and there was the Glenville shootout, right? The Glenville riot in Cleveland, right, was kind of a pivotal moment in 1968, like an urban uprising. And Ahmed Evans was a Black nationalist who was very, very important in Cleveland's history. You know, and you read about shootout in Cleveland, and they call it the Huff Riot, I guess, and the Revolutionary Action Movement, which was a Maoist formation, and you know, yeah, it was pretty wild. You read about that, Ahmed Evans and the Glenville shootout. So yeah, there you go. Okay, I hope that was helpful, Susan. All right. Now we do have a couple more coffees that have come in. Both of them are from Richard, unanimous. He says, why has traditional Orthodox Christianity or traditional Catholicism in the U.S. become associated with anti-Blackness or anti-Semitism? This is just in the U.S. Don't know about Russia or Serbia or Ethiopia. Well, from what you said about Orthodox, Russian Orthodox stuff in the USA is not, that I understand. In fact, my understanding is that there are Russian Orthodox churches that are entirely Black in America, right? I believe it's in San Francisco. You have a church where they use jazz as their musical form, and they are Russian Orthodox believers. There was also a Russian Orthodox priest in America that was Haitian and was very involved in the Haitian liberation movement. So Russian Orthodoxy in America, I don't, in my understanding, it's not associated with anti-Black, right? Now, I know that there were a number of people that were in like the alt-right groups, like Charlottesville kind of people that converted to being Russian Orthodox. But my understanding is the Russian Orthodox believers in America, I mean, at least, you know, historically are not considered anti-Black. you know, they're just not. I mean, that's just not the reality. I mean, I just don't understand them that way. Right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there are like people that I guess you could call racist or white supremacist who have converted to being Russian Orthodox, but my understanding is that the Russian Orthodox Church in America is pro-black generally. I'm trying to find Russian Orthodox priest, Haitian, right? Yeah, there's a lot of Haitian Russian Orthodox people in America, right? And the Russian Orthodox Church has a big presence in Haiti. So yeah, that I don't, as far as Russian Orthodox. Now, for traditional Catholics, there is a particular reason for that. Okay. So in America, right? America is an interesting place, right? I've always pointed out that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in America have pretty much served the same constituencies the whole time, except for the South, right? The South flipped. But other than that, they've served the same constituencies. The Republican Party has been the party of rural people, and the Democratic Party has been the party of urban political machines. Now, when the Republican Party started in the 1850s, the rural people were what they called free soilers, which were they were anti-slavery, and they were abolitionists, radical abolitionists, and Protestants who their Protestant faith opposed slavery, part of the Great Awakening, right? It was go west, young man, and grow up with the country. That's what the Republican, the abolitionist activist Horace Greeley, who was the editor of the New York Tribune, who hired Karl Marx to be his London correspondent. He said, "Go west, young man." And it was true. Many people in New England, in Boston, in the Boston area, in New York City, in Philadelphia, who were abolitionists, moved to Ohio, moved to Pennsylvania to start religious communities or to just start a farm somewhere or whatever. And that a lot of the farmers of the Midwest and even further west were Republicans, and they tended to be Protestants. They tended to not drink alcohol, and they tended to be abolitionists, right? And that was how the Republican Party started. Whereas the Democratic Party is much older. It goes back to Thomas Jefferson, and it was the Tammany Hall machine of New York City. It was the Daily machine of Chicago. It's the urban political machines, right? Now what happened? Well, Woodrow Wilson was a Democratic president who was not in bed with the urban political machines. He did not trust the urban political machines, and he was very much in with the slaveocracy of the South, with the South and with the British Empire. So Woodrow Wilson, in order to weaken the urban political machines, which were largely Roman Catholic, he built the Ku Klux Klan. And the Ku Klux Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, the original version of it started after the Civil War as kind of a attempt to revive the Confederacy. And the second incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan was the biggest one, and it was started by Woodrow Wilson in 1914, and it kind of peaked in its influence in the 1920s. It was largely anti-Catholic, and it was a way to get anti-Catholic rural Protestants who tended to be Republicans into the Democratic Party. And that a lot of state Democratic parties in the Midwest were taken over by the Ku Klux Klan. And one of the main things the Ku Klux Klan focused on was outlawing the drinking of alcohol. Because Catholics are allowed to drink, right? Catholics drink alcohol, whereas, the fanatical Protestants did not drink. And so they got prohibition passed, and that the urban political machines tended to be run by Catholic folks, Irish, Italian, German. There was a wave of mass migration to the United States from Italy, from Ireland, from Eastern Europe. Those folks were overwhelmingly Catholic, and they drank alcohol. So the Ku Klux Klan got alcohol outlawed. And the Ku Klux Klan, they were Democrats, but they were very, very racist, and they hated Catholics. And so that whole thing, the Republicans were the party of small farmers, of rural folks. The Democrats were the party of urban political machines. Urban political machines are very Roman Catholic. So why is it that traditional Catholicism is associated, there's a long roundabout way of explaining this, is associated with anti-Black racism in America? Well, it starts out in the 1930s, okay? In the 1930s, Roosevelt was the president, and Roosevelt was a wealthy New York City, WASP. He's from an ultra-wealthy family in New York. He was the governor of New York. He became president of the United States. Roosevelt was a longtime Democrat from an ultra-wealthy family. Roosevelt was Protestant, and Roosevelt was a Bonapartist, and he pivoted toward aligning with communists, toward aligning with the labor movement, toward aligning with the Soviet Union. And the urban political machines did not like Roosevelt, right? And so you had the formation of what was called the American Liberty League. And the American Liberty League was headed by Al Smith. And Al Smith was an Irish American who was the head of the Democratic Party machine of New York City. Every year, every election, they have the Al Smith dinner, which is like a Catholic charity fundraiser that they have in New York City after Al Smith. And Al Smith was just this very important New York City politician who was Catholic and who was an anti-Roosevelt Democrat. He formed the American Liberty League. And he was against Roosevelt because he thought Roosevelt was a communist. He thought Roosevelt was too soft on the Soviet Union, etc. And the urban Democrats that were Catholic, a lot of them were sympathetic to Mussolini's Italy. A lot of them were sympathetic to Nazi Germany. And you had a layer of urban Catholic political machine Democrats who broke with Roosevelt. Part of it was an ethnic thing, that the communist labor unions were led by Jewish and Eastern European folks. And so they were Irish and they were cops and firemen. They did not like the labor unions that were being led by Jewish and Eastern European folks. And so because they were cops and firemen and they were in the urban political machine, they didn't like Roosevelt. And so you had a layer and that you had the formation of the Catholic trade union federations that were formed that were anti-communist wings of the labor unions that didn't want the communists to run the labor unions, right? In the United Auto Workers, you had different factions. You had the communists who had their faction, but you also had the Catholic auto workers that were against communists. And after World War II, McCarthyism really started out as the Catholic machine, the Catholic urban political machines, the Catholic trade union federations, the Kennedy family in Boston. They were big supporters of Joe McCarthy, right? Papa Kennedy was on the House Un-American Activities Committee board, and in New York City and in a lot of urban centers, the urban political machines run by Roman Catholic Democrats purged the Roosevelt Democrats, right? And Henry Wallace was pushed out of the Democratic Party. Had to form the Progressive Party in 1948, and that anti-communism became a big part of Catholicism. Okay, and so that was a big thing. A lot of the Catholic organizations in America, their strength, their height of influence was fighting Roosevelt in the 1930s. You had the radio priest Father Coughlin, who was a Nazi sympathizer. He had a radio show in Michigan, and he was a priest, Father Coughlin. He was a well-known fascist sympathizer who was supporting Hitler at a radio show. And then after World War II, they were very much in favor of McCarthyism. And Joe McCarthy was Catholic, and he was an Irish Catholic guy who was the face of the, anti-communist hysteria post-World War II. So a lot of the organizations, like organized political Catholicism, you could call it, right? You talk about political Islam, political Catholicism. The height of its influence was fighting Roosevelt, and in a lot of cases doing so in a way that was sympathetic to the Nazis or to the Italian fascists, and then McCarthyism. But then what happened? Vatican II, right? Vatican II is, I believe it was 1962, early 60s. The Vatican dramatically shifted its orientation. Vatican II was a really big turning point where the Catholic Church changed a lot of its beliefs. And also Vatican II was very much the Catholic Church pivoting away from supporting the United States. 1962 to 1965, the Second Vatican Council, it was called, the Catholic Church repudiated a lot of its beliefs And the Catholic Church also passed really strong condemnations of the United States for bombing Japan and bombing Germany during World War II, but also for bombing civilians during the Korean War, bombing civilians in Vietnam, etc. And starting with Vatican II, the Catholic Church kind of pivoted away from being fully aligned with the United States. Vatican II, to be a trad Catholic, means you reject Vatican II for the most part. Again, it's a sliding scale. There are a lot of trad Catholics that are still in the Catholic Church. There are Catholic breakaways that have officially broken with the Vatican. It's a sliding scale. The trad Catholics are a very wide tent. But generally, what gets one considered to be a trad Catholic is that they reject Vatican II. They still do the Latin Mass, right? Latin Mass. That's the Second Vatican. They said do the Mass in the language that you're in. Well, it used to be Mass was only done in the, trad Catholics tend to do the Latin Mass, and they tend to reject Vatican II. And in America, trad Catholics often have a conspiracy theory that the Vatican became communist controlled, right? One of the priests, signed a statement opposing fascism in Spain, so therefore he must be a communist. That kind of Thank you for your patience, everyone. So that was my bookshelf falling down. I'm all right. Don't call my phone. I'm fine. The Jews did that. Yeah, of course, right? But anyway, yeah. So I don't know. That was my bookshelf falling down on me. I leaned too far back into my bookshelf, and that's what happens. Life goes on. But I'm back. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. That's going to be fun. Wild times. Thanks for being here. But anyway, the point I was making was that because so much of organized Catholicism in America is based on being very, very anti-communist, because the Catholic Church changed its policies so dramatically with Vatican II, Catholics in America who reject Vatican II are very much caught up in this kind of pro-fascist space, but not always, right? Again, there are some trad Catholics that are very friendly. There's also something called the Catholic Worker Movement, right? The Catholic Worker Movement is followers of Dorothy Day, and they're socialists, pacifists, basically, right? You read about Dorothy Day. So it's complicated, right? And that you have some layers of trad Catholicism that pivot toward Dorothy Day. So it's complicated. That's my answer. It's complicated. But yeah, in America, unfortunately, because of everything that has gone on in our history and all of that, because of unique historical circumstances, trad Catholicism in the United States is associated with being far right. It's associated with like John Birch Society kind of politics. It's associated with the fascists weren't so bad because at least they killed communism. I don't think there's many trad Catholics that would actually call themselves Nazis or fascist sympathizers. But there is a layer of them that very much do feel they have, kind of an anti-Semitic thing, but they also have this obsessive anti-communism thing that goes together with that. And I don't know, it is what it is, right? Right. But anyway, we're going to answer the next question from Richard. Richard says, why has pro-Palestine stuff taken over by the Judeo-Bolshevik crap? Who pushed this in the U.S.? Where does Candace Owens' rhetoric come from? Well, dude, I hate to say it. That's the left's fault. That's the left's fault. Yeah, it's totally the left's fault, Richard. That's because of the fact that that the pro-Palestine movement largely is run by woke leftists who do everything they can to oppose any possible form of populism. Right? You're not allowed to be a populist on the American left. And I went to those pro-Palestine rallies. I agreed with the message, but the tone, everything was, I hate you. Everything was F you. I mean, the left has made it impossible to be pro-Palestine and you're either a woke leftist or a fascist. You can't be a populist and be pro-Palestine because the woke left won't tolerate that. So, a lot of the right wing, they already have this anti-communism fixation. Everything they don't like is communism. And the woke left wants nothing to do with them. So then they just assume, well, the woke left are all communists and communism is just another plot by the Jews. And it just fits like a glove, right? Look, I'll tell you, every anti-Semitic book I have ever read starts out with communism is the worst thing that ever existed. And communism is so awful. And didn't you know all the communists are Jews? Jews run communism. And that's how every anti-Semitic book I've ever read starts that way, right? I'm fine. I don't need any paramedics. I'm fine. My bookshelf just fell down. It's not the end of the world. It's happened before. I'll survive. And so because of that, right, it just makes perfect sense. If you're on the right and you're anti-Israel, you're not welcome in the left, right? You're not, so that's where you're going to go. So that's the left's fault. And no, the majority of pro-Palestine stuff, Richard, is not saying that. The majority of pro-Palestine stuff is just saying woke stuff. That's why. I mean, it's internet, it's anti-Israel conservatism is dominated by that stuff because it's already right-wing, it's already anti-communist, and the left will have no dialogue with those people. That's why. So I am going to give a chance for more questions to be asked. So if you want to ask more questions, you can ask them. And I guess in honor of our Catholic friends, I was already kind of planning to put this on. I have never been Catholic, right? It's funny. I will occasionally see on the internet that I'm Catholic. I am not Catholic. I don't know where people get this from. I have never been Catholic. I have always been Protestant. I grew up in a Protestant household. I have never been Catholic, with all due respect to my Catholic friends. I just don't understand it. I really don't. I'm not here to debate religion, and I respect that. And honestly, this is a very, very Catholic song I'm about to put on, right? And it's probably contrary to my own beliefs, right? I guess one thing that Protestants generally oppose is any praying to Mary, right? In Protestant teaching, Mary is just a person, right? She's the person. She may have given birth to Jesus, but she's just a person. Whereas in Catholicism, Mary is a special figure. She's the Queen of Heaven, etc. But there is a Catholic hymn honoring, I guess they call her Holy Mother Mary, that I actually find to be very meaningful. I like it, right? So, I certainly don't endorse this song on a religious basis, but I find it to be very soothing and peaceful. It's just a very beautiful Catholic hymn. It's got some Latin words in it. It has the word Salve Maria, Salve Regina, which means Hail Queen in Latin. And it has English words also in it. So I'm just going to put on this Catholic song that I find very beautiful. But if anyone has any more questions, please send them in. Via Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your questions. And I will answer them after I get back. So here we go. I am going to put on this Catholic hymn that I find peaceful, though I don't endorse it theologically. All right. Here we go.
Hail, Holy Queen, enthroned above, Almighty. our sweetness here below. Oh Maria, our hope and sorrow and oh Maria, try cherubim, sing with us, ye seraphim. Heaven and earth resound the hymn. Salve, salve, salve Regina. To thee we cry, poor sons of Eve. Oh Maria, to thee we sigh, we mourn, we grieve. Oh Maria, triumph all ye cherubim, sing with us ye seraphim. Heaven and earth resound the hymn. Salve, salve, salve Regina. Triumph all ye cherubim, sing with us ye seraphim. Heaven and earth resound the hymn. Salve, salve, salve Regina. Salve, salve, salve Regina.
Yeah, I find that to be a very soothing song. But anyhow, we also need to show Penny's other video that she sent about the robotics competition, the robotics team from Burkina Faso. So I'm going to put that on as well. But again, if you got any more questions, best way to send them is buy me a coffee. You can also send a Rumble rant. You can cash at me at CalebMoppa22. The best way to send your questions is to buy me a coffee. Always appreciated. So yeah, we're going to put Penny's video on. This is the video she sent about the robotics team from Burkina Faso. So yeah, if anyone wants to send any more questions while we do that, that'll be great. Here we go. Burkina Faso robotics champs.
And the medal for the Judges Award goes to
Five young, passionate, and determined Bikinabe people in Panama City. They championed the theme of eco-equilibrium and proposed a technological solution designed to protect the environment. This project was worth watching. On time and everything. The emotion remains strong, as does the memory of the victory.
It was a medal that we searched for and found. So I would say that we were happy, but we also had a feeling of accomplishment, I would say, but half-heartedly. I would say that. Sure, we won the medal, but we also learned a lot.
The medal symbolizes great pride for us because we really wanted it. We worked hard. We didn't give up. We really put in the effort and we got it too.
Their robot impressed with its precision, its originality, and the creativity they put in. Each piece, each choice, each technique reflects the months of effort and short nights. A team effort that allowed Burkina Faso to reach the top.
The preparation before the competition was a bit difficult, but I would say it went well. We weren't all there. Two of us had a whole class going to school. There were two of us working here, and all of us mentors who weren't there were also working. So we were with just one who accompanied us. There you have it.
Behind this performance are supervisors who believed in them from the start. They supervise the young people, sometimes with limited resources, but with a solid conviction that the Burkinabe genius can impose itself in major competitions.
It still took a lot of sacrifices to achieve this, because since 2019, we have tried every year to prepare the teams for 2 to 3 months before they can go to the World Cup. And I can't tell you how many challenges there were during the training, from receiving the kit to the training itself, and also all the hassle involved in TV, going to the competition itself, during the competition, and also on the way. Antokre competition azama sapor adahiak.
And the challenge was mainly managing the stress. On the first day, as soon as we arrived to transport the robot to avoid overwork, we had completely dismantled the robot. And as soon as we arrived at the hotel at 8 or 9 p.m., the young people didn't want to sleep, so they automatically wanted to put the robot back together there. So that was the first challenge, the excitement on the first day to seeing the stand, decorating the stand, presenting the robot to others, and then also getting to know the other participants.
Despite the obstacles, they held on, and the Burkina Faso team has written its name in the history of world robotics. A victory snatched with rigor, discipline, and team spirit.
We really demonstrated what is called a high level, with teams that had more than 100, maybe 150 participants in a nation, made up of engineers, people who are truly focused solely and purely on mechanics. I would say that it was really more than the high level. I would say that what the jury really liked was the determination. I would say that it is.
To continue this adventure and take their innovations further, the young people are launching an appeal. They want partnerships, support, and a favorable framework to develop their work.
The message that I wanted to convey much more is to really support the different activities, the different initiatives of all the associations that work in the field of IT today. We are really making an effort to bring much more knowledge to children these days. That is really the key to success, the education of the youngest. That is why, from the very beginning, we are initiating programs that will invest the youngest and then the teenagers, at least to raise their awareness, because nowadays we are already in a dynamic where all technologies
advance thanks to those who dare. The Gobela Burkina team has just proven that Burkina Faso creates and wins when faced with dares.
That was cool. That was a great video. Cool. Great. I'm glad they're educating kids to know all about robotics. Well, again, if you got any more questions, buy me a coffee is the best way to send them. I don't see any more questions as of yet. But yeah, if you can send them in, it would be appreciated. We don't have that much left to talk about if people don't send questions. I do want to remind people to come to our event in New Jersey. It's going to be pretty awesome. I've been working on the venue and getting everything in order, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Check out my new website. I guess first, if you want to register for the event in New Jersey, this is where to register. It's going to be pretty great. It's going to be pretty awesome. So I hope to see you there. It will be a public meeting of CPI. So I found the video when Penny sent it in. Penny is the one who sent it in. There you go. But yeah, you can register for the event. Also, I do have a new website that's up if you'd like to check it out. calebmoppinbooks.net. And you got all kinds of stuff, related to what I do here and all that. That's pretty cool. Also, I did publish an article kind of about, what I talked about with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's on the CPI website. I published that, just earlier tonight to get the word out about where I stand on all these things. So yeah, you can check that out as well. But yeah, okay, well, I guess I will give you all one last chance to send in any questions you've got. Buy me a coffee, send me some more questions. If not, I'll end this and start putting my bookshelf back together. Hey, that's how you know this is real. This isn't some fake polished content. This is the real thing. My bookshelf falls down midstream and we keep going. right? So yeah, so send any questions you got. Buy me a coffee, send me a question. I'm just going to put on one of these hokey communist songs I put on, during these streams. I'm going to put on Arise Proletarians. And then if anyone's got any questions, I'll answer them. And if not, I'll say goodnight. So here we go.
So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Proletarians of every land, under one banner we take our stand. And with an iron hand we'll overthrow the bourgeoisie. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Take up the proletarian task to slash the enemies of our class. Revolutionary violence is the path of the working class. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Marx, Engels, great Lenin and Stalin, their immortal work shines bright, urging us on to greater heights to win victory in our fight. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Glorious Albania proves to us that liberty is only one when the party leads the way and the people take up the gun. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. On Canadian soil a red flower blooms, for here we build our great party. To liberate our country, we must make the rich pay. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. CPCML is our party, we'll defend it with our very lives. Comrades, hearts beat in unity, and we fear no sacrifice. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Keep dictatorship of the proletariat and class struggle firmly in mind. Follow revolution's path and we'll liberate mankind. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. Glory to Marxism, Leninism, and proletarian internationalism. Long, long live communism, the future belongs to us. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party. So arise, proletarians, lead the way. War is raging every day. We have no fear of the enemy with our Communist Party.
All right. Hope you liked it. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions that have come in. So on that note, I guess we'll end the stream. I'll put the closing music on. I'll probably be back tomorrow, maybe, if definitely the next night. I usually don't stream on Sundays, but tomorrow may be the exception. We shall see. But yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah, talk to y'all soon. All right. Catch you next time. Also, remember, you can send Rumble rants anytime. So if you're seeing this tomorrow and you want me to talk about something, send it in, right? Rumble rants are always appreciated. All right, here we go. new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. All right, time to go put my bookshelf back together. Good night.